Hey guys, it's Rush. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the channel. I'd be lying if I said to you it hasn't been a painful experience trying to find the right 6-button fight pad. And I feel like that journey has come to an end now. These are the three 6-button fight pads that I'm using for Street Fighter. We have the Fightwedge V3, Hori Octa Pro, and the Turtle Beach Stealth Pivot controller. The Hori Octa Pro is the newest addition. I did have high hopes for this control pad, and I'll be honest, it has not delivered. But let's talk about this more in the video and let's compare the three. So the Hori Octa Pro, on paper, this was going to be the 6-button fight pad. But in reality, I don't feel like Hori have executed this very well. So you can see I've modified this control pad. I've actually removed the analog stick. I took the pad apart, I pulled the analog stick off. So that's why it looks different. The reason I did that is because my thumb, when using the D-pad, was touching the analog stick and it was actually registering input. So I had to turn the analog stick off in the software. But even still, it was very annoying when my thumb was touching the analog stick. So that was definitely problem number one. Second issue, which is related to that, is the gate. So where the gate sits, where the actual analog stick sits within, that is a raised lip, if you see. So we've got a bit of a recess. So your thumb will still touch that. So because that's so close to the D-pad, that in itself is still a problem. They could have just shifted this down so it's in line with the right thumbstick, this button here. So those who sat there like they do on the PS controllers. But nope, they shoved it up next to the D-pad, and that is not a good experience in my opinion. But that isn't the biggest issue with this controller. The biggest issue is the combination of these super sensitive buttons that use switches, clicky buttons, which I now know I'm not a fan of, but these are super sensitive. You just put your thumb on them and they go in with barely any pressure at all. There's barely any travel. They're super sensitive, but that in conjunction with this stiff, awkward D-pad, which is similar to the Hori Octa D-pad, but not quite as bad. They don't work very well together. And the biggest issue I've had is where I'm doing motion inputs. So I'm doing fireballs, I'm doing DP, and I'm pressing my button. And my 30 years of muscle memory from doing motion inputs and pressing a button to get my special, when I look at my inputs in training mode, I'm actually getting the button press before I complete the motion input. So as I'm doing the motion input, I get to there and I press, it's still registering down forward. So I don't get my special moves. That is a big problem. And the more I focused on having better execution, being more precise with my inputs on the D-pad and delaying my button presses, the more frustrated I got. It didn't feel very intuitive at all. The two do not work in harmony. And my critique, my advice to Hori is, if you're going to use switches for the face buttons and the D-pad. If you're going to use membranes or just whatever a standard D-pad would be, standard buttons would be, use that for the D-pad and the face buttons. Don't mix and match, but it's worse because of how sensitive these buttons are. Everything else about this pad is fantastic. The shape of it, the ergonomics, shoulder buttons, you've got the paddles on the rear, you've got a touchpad, you've got so much functionality, and you've got the right analog stick. So you can play first-person shooters, 3D games by using these two thumbsticks. This one doesn't protrude, but you can move it left and right to maneuver. On paper, like I said, it's a really good pad, but in principle, trying the pad out in Street Fighter 6, I was having the worst time. It could possibly be one of the worst 6-button fight pads I've used for Street Fighter 6. I was so stressed because I couldn't get my inputs. My execution was just terrible because of the way this D-pad functions in conjunction with these face buttons. The Fightwedge V3, it was a pleasant surprise. Even the Fightwedge V2, I knew nothing about its controller, and when Banana Faction hit me up, I couldn't believe, firstly, the project they'd undertaken and what they'd done. And the upgrade to the V3 just blew my mind. So it is improved because of the shape. The ergonomics of this pad is really good. It does use switches for all of its buttons, which makes sense. So there's consistency throughout the pad. But look at the travel of the buttons. These are very sensitive, but you have to press and move them down. You can actually see, I think it's this one. You can see it a bit better with one of them. Yeah, there you go. I can actually feel it. So when I press down, it moves. But that's the, see there? So if that's me pressing down, it's this point where you see it actually go in and press the switch down. There's a bit of movement first, then the switch actually compresses. So the way the buttons feel, I like the feedback. They are soft, they are sensitive, but there's travel to them, and that's good. But they work in conjunction with the two D-pads. Actually, two D-pads you get for this. You get the primary one, which is a slider D-pad, like an arcade stick. You also get this secondary one, which is more of a traditional D-pad, but they use switches as well. They press down on the switches. There's a stick in the back, like an arm on here, that will press left, right, up and down, pressing down on the switches. So this works well with those buttons. My only complaints about this pad are the shoulders. I felt they should extend a little bit more to the edge, and they sit quite closely. And being flat, it can be quite hard to judge where you are on the top of the pad, but it's not a big issue. I can file these down if I want to create more space. You know, it's very easy to remove these and create new shoulder buttons. So that's another option as well. You could just change them, build your own, and just get them to sit within the switch itself. But that is a minor complaint. The D-pad does spin. Now, many people have said the whole point of it spinning is part of the pad. It's meant to spin to help with inputs, which I understand and I do totally get. But for me, it created a bit of extra miss execution on the D-pad because it's moving around quite a bit. I would not want it to move, and that would help with execution. I feel if this had a static D-pad didn't spin, then this would probably skyrocket to my #1 fight pad right now. Which leads us to the Turtle Beach Stealth Pivot. This controller, I did like this controller when I first used it, but I had some niggles with inputs. So with combos, it's almost like the directional inputs were like lingering, and I'd press a button and I'd get like a fireball or a dragon punch by mistake in Street Fighter 6. But coming back to this pad after the Hori Octa Pro, it's been a real delight. The D-pad's not as stiff and awkward as the Hori Octa Pro. That stiff D-pad with the sensitive face buttons on the Hori Octa Pro is the problem, but this isn't quite as stiff. It's slightly bigger than the Hori Octa Pro as well, which is nice. I wouldn't say it's a requirement for me, but it does make a difference, and I prefer the size of this one. This concaves like the Hori Octa Pro as well. Face buttons, standard buttons, they're pretty small. They are gloss. They have like a rounded top to them, so they taper off at the edges. But they feel good, and they feel good in conjunction with the D-pad. The way they register on the controller is the exact same way. So doing inputs and pressing is perfectly fine. But it's not even just that. There's so many things about this pad that make it good. It's got a lot of weight to it, which I prefer. The ergonomics of this pad is like top tier. It really sits well in the hands. My middle fingers sit directly on the paddles on the rear, so you have paddles, which is lovely. The shoulders, so you have shoulders for the front buttons, which are big in size. I can definitely feel when I'm on them because of their shape and their texture. The rear I call them triggers. I know some people call them paddles as well, but you have triggers. They're long, so again, you know where your finger is. My finger's on the shoulder at the front or the bumper. If it's on the trigger at the back, I know exactly where I am. So even though they're quite close, you won't press them both down or get misinputs. But you also have this functionality as well, where you can flip that switch. If you want to play other games, it then becomes dynamic. So like a throttle, so you can use it in that method for other games. But that's the other advantage of this pad. It's not just a fight pad. And I think that's the way fight pads will go now in the future, where they can be used on other games. So if I spin the modules round, I can then use it on whatever shooters, first-person games, 3D games. It works for both games, which the Hori Octa does. It has those two thumbsticks, but this is much better implemented, and the functionality in terms of the way the buttons work with the D-pad, it's so much more comfortable on this controller. And that's why out of all three of them, this one for me comes out on top. It's more comfortable. I feel better on this pad. I don't like switches. I definitely don't like switches for my face buttons. So having regular buttons is a delight on this controller. So going back to the Hori Octa Pro again. So these face buttons, as I mentioned, way too sensitive, no feedback, no travel. They feel lifeless. I don't like it. Other than the clickiness, I really don't like these buttons. And just in general, I don't like switches on my face buttons. I think on fight pads, like across the board, I don't like switches anywhere. It's just not my preference at all. The way they feel and the feedback just isn't very nice. But in conjunction with this D-pad, this sluggish, slow, stiff, awkward D-pad, when you do your motions in that direction, you're there touching up the the lip touching up the analog stick. This whole section just does not work. It's better than the Hori Octa for sure, but it's not as good as the Hori Fighting Commander. So as I mentioned, this journey, this 6-button fight pad journey has been horrible. I haven't really enjoyed it. It's made for great content, but it's been a horrible quest that I've been on. That's the best way to put it. And it made me think about the Hori Fighting Commander. I did think to myself, you know what? Was that pad even that good in the end? And am I just holding these new pads to this bar that will never be reached because my memory of it is not real? I'm giving it too much credit. So what I did is I went on eBay and I tried to find a Hori Fighting Commander at a reasonable price. And believe it or not, I found a brand new Hori Fighting Commander for the Switch. And that I've got here. So feast your eyes on this, 2025. Comparing those 3 pads to this, so the shape, you'll notice the shape is very small, but because it's chunky, it's very chunky, and it's got this thickness there, it's got a lip there, your hands actually sit really nicely on the controller. Because it's smaller, my fingers extend further over the top so I can get to these buttons a lot easier. Look at the space in between these shoulders, massive. You'll never press 2 shoulders on the same side at the same time. Face buttons are massive. I won't lie, the face buttons are huge. Like, I'm actually not used to face buttons being so big. I'm more used to the pads that I use now with smaller face buttons, but they don't feel bad. They don't have too much travel, but why these buttons feel good is they're not sensitive. I have to press down with significant force, but it's not too much force to get my inputs. That feels nice, but there's no switches. This feels the same. You've got to put some force in it, but it does move around very, very well. I think I prefer the roundness, like having the round base of the Hori Octa Pro. I don't really like it being just a cross, which is always one of my complaints. That, and also the fact that this will start to wobble a lot over time. Once the plastic wears on the actual housing, it'll start to move a lot after about 9 months to 12 months, after a year. So you do have to replace the whole pad, or you can kind of bodge a fix. So that is a complaint I have about this controller. But the D-pad in conjunction with these buttons, it all works in synchronization. The button inputs feel good. The way, the timing of the button, the way you do them in sync just feels right. I've tried it on Street Fighter 5, I tried it on Street Fighter 6, and it was amazing. It just felt so good. And this is why I rate this pad and I give these other pads such a hard time, because this is an old controller and nothing has got even close to what this offered. I'd say the closest was the B-Top, but the problem with the B-Top is it's got Sega Saturn style D-pad, which means it's massive for one, the D-pad, and it will be wobbling everywhere after a few months, and that's what I hate about the B-Top. The controller from brand new, it's fantastic. But not only that, with the B-Top, you've got the tiny shoulder buttons, it's super thin. It isn't as good as the Fighting Commander, but it is a runner-up to this pad. But this is the highest tier of 6-button fight pad. And what's disappointing is, Hori built this pad. They built the controller, they have the blueprint, and they go and make trash like this. Like, it's bad me calling this trash, but that's what it is. It's a better version of the Octa that's still not great because of bad decision making, and then a mixture of button technologies. But like I said, it's been a painful experience, and after all this time, the pad was there. I'm going to stock up on Switch controllers. For Street Fighter 7, the sequel to Street Fighter 5, I'm going to buy myself loads of Switch controllers. And you may be wondering why I'm saying Switch over the PS4 Fighting Commander. The reason I say the Switch version is because you can actually map all 10 buttons. So you can map the 6 face buttons, you can map the shoulders, but these buttons here, you can see LSB, RSB, left stick button, right stick button. So you actually have 10 mappable buttons. So the ultimate fight pad existed all along. I just didn't realize it was in the Switch version of the Hori Fighting Commander. So let me know what you think. Any questions or any queries, always give me a shout. Have you tried the Hori Octa Pro yet? What do you think of it? If you have, send it back. Send it back and buy one of these. That's my opinion. No, I do joke a little bit. This pad on paper is fantastic, and I think some people will like it, but for me, it's the bar's too high with the Fighting Commander. That is the video, guys. I will catch you in the next one. Take care.